Let's hear you, Ed.
Yeah, you good, and the level's fine.
Okay. Just got a tweet from David Stretch via Twitter at AVForums. Hi, love the podcast, but can someone please buy Ed a new microphone so he doesn't sound like he's talking through a sock?
All right, okay. Well, I'll see what I can do.
I've got to say, you don't sound very socky today.
Well, it's more, I think, down to poor microphone placement. If I get animated, shut up. If I get animated, I tend to move my head and then don't move the mic. So.
But have we ever gotten you animated, Ed? Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday the 19th of August, and joining me on this edition are Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
And to make anything disappear, please let me know. I've got an Assistant Editor who has outlived his usefulness.
The other Mark, Hodgkinson.
What do you mean there's a Mark? There's only one Mark here. Help me be human.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Do you normally take coffee with your sugar?
The reason I said the other Mark, it seems to be we either have...
We only ever get
alternating, aren't we?
Yeah. They're never in the same podcast together, I think. There's something going on there. So, Mark, tell us what we can win in the competitions.
Stuff. Good stuff.
Okay.
Blu-rays, 2 of them. War of the Roses, Danny DeVito, Michael Douglas, and Kathleen Turner.
Any good?
I can't remember.
It's
I've seen
one of my
it.
wife's favourite films.
I've seen it. I think I probably enjoyed it. It was the 80s. Was it the 80s?
It is, very 80s.
Yeah, whose favourite film, Ed?
One of my wife's favourite films.
One of your wife's?
One of my wife, yeah. Stop saying.
Kelly's Heroes on Blu-ray also, which I think I enjoyed as well. I can't remember much about it. And then a bundle of stuff from Scan, which is a keyboard, mouse, PSU and a case worth £160.
Okay. Any previous winners?
Possibly. No.
No, it's the same competitions we've been announcing for weeks. They all end at the end of the month, don't they, really? So we'll have some winners at the beginning of September. Probably in the IFA special. More on that later. Right, let's move on. Our first look at Denon's new X3200. I did the 3100 about 6 months ago, Steve.
Yeah.
Didn't have Atmos or DTSX, but it was an absolute stonker of an AV receiver. So you've got the new one. What's your first impressions?
First impressions, very good. As you said, Phil, the X3100 was great. This is essentially the same, but with the addition of Dolby Atmos, and it will have DTSX when they release a firmware update for it. It's capable of doing it. It's just waiting for firmware update, as I believe are all the manufacturers at the moment. I don't think anything yet actually decodes DTSX. I'm expecting, in the case of Denon at least, expecting this firmware update to be probably late October and November. But if you buy it, we'll get the update at some point. So you'll have both of the formats, both of the dominant formats, or we expect to be dominant formats, although up to now, I must say, things have been pretty quiet on the DTSX front. But things are going gangbusters as far as Dolby Atmos goes. There's been lots of announcements recently for more discs, so that's good news. Performance-wise, I think it's really good. It's got all the great things I like about Denon's receivers these days. First of all, they've really simplified the back panel. I think, as you noticed on yours, it's mostly just HDMI inputs and outputs, 7 on the back, 1 on the front, and 2 outputs. These outputs are all HDMI 2.0 with HDCP 2.2 support, so a bit of future-proofing there, which is good to see. Simplified remote control. It's got the setup procedures, the setup assistant, I think they call it, which takes you through the process of setting it up. So if you're new to receivers, and this is targeted at that kind of price point, £750, so it's not overly expensive. If you're new to them, it takes you through the process simply and logically and makes it as intuitive as possible for users. And I think that's really good, because in the past, a lot of AV receivers have had masses of inputs on the back, most of which you're probably never going to use, and loads of buttons on the remote control, which is a bit scary for some consumers, particularly those that are new to AVRs. So it's got that. It's a 7.2 channel receiver, so 7 channels amplification, which basically means you are restricted to a certain extent in terms of what you can do with regards to either Atmos or DTSX. So you can do 7.2 standard 7-channel setup, or you can do 5.2.2, which basically means 5 channels of normal surround and on 2 channels above you. There aren't any pre-outs to add any more to that. So it's basically limiting you to either 5.1, 7.1, or 5.1.2. So there's a bit of, in that sense, it kind of falls between two stools, because you could get the X3200, which is very similar in terms of what it can do. It does DTSX and Atmos as well. But that's only about £500. Or you could go a little bit higher, up to £1,000 and above, and then go for the new 4200s coming out, which will give you a bit more flexibility in terms of setup. So it kind of does fall a little between two stools. As a performer, it's great. It really works. It sounds great. I was really impressed with it. I just think that maybe, depending on your point of view, if you're thinking I'm tight on money, I want to get something relatively cheap, then you might want to look at the X200, because it's only going to be £500. If you've got a bit more money to spend and you want a bit more flexibility in terms of immersive surround formats, then you might want to look at the 4200 instead.
What do you mean by that, Steve? Are you talking about?
Well, no. What I mean is that will have, even if I think it's got 9 channels for one thing, so that gives you the immediate option of doing 7.1.2. So having 7 channels of normal surround plus 2 overheads. And I think we were talking about with THX, losing the 2 rear channels may not be a big deal when you're just listening to a 5.1 soundtrack, but it can make a big difference if you're listening to an Atmos soundtrack, because you kind of have a hole in that surround field behind you. And there's no way of filling that, basically.
Yeah, obviously in a larger room, I would agree with that. But in a small room, let's say 15 feet by 10 feet, you're not going to use some tripoles. Then a 5.2.2 is going to work pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, well, you could do. I'm just saying, I'm just pointing out that you're kind of limited in terms of upgradability. If you wanted to add more things later, you can't. You're stuck with, that's the limit of what it can do, basically. But in terms of performance, what I'm saying is that you can do a lot of this with the 200, the 2200 as well, which is cheaper. So it is kind of sitting between two different receivers.
What's the difference in? Is it power?
Yeah, basically it's power. So again, depends on the size of your room and how much power you want. Certainly,
depends on your speakers as well, how sensitive.
And the 3200 certainly had plenty of power for a normal, what I would consider to be a regular system in a normal room. No question about that. Other things it's got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, very easy to set up. It also will be compatible with Denon's HEOS multi-room system, which is another nice little feature. And you've got, what else have you got? Oh, Spotify's built in if you want Spotify Connect. So, it's a really nicely designed, sensibly laid out, easy to use receiver that's going to certainly appeal to anyone looking in that kind of £500 to £1,000 price bracket.
I've got to say, I really like their amps. And like you say, I mean, the 3100, I had that driving not only the M&Ks, but also the XTZs, which they're both 4 ohm. Loads, and not the most sensitive speakers in the world, usually quite difficult to drive, and the 3100 drove them without any issues. So the 3200 I'd imagine is going to be the same, just with the upgraded Dolby and so on. So in terms of power, I couldn't fault the 3100 unless you were really pushing it, and then it become brittle as it run out of headroom. But for reasonable listening levels, just below reference.
I think for a realistic listening level in most people's lounges, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, when you talk about reference levels, you can't listen to stuff at that volume in most people's homes, I don't think, unless it's in a dedicated room. It's just not practical because it's pretty loud. At reference level, it can get pretty loud.
What?
Being
having
deaf? Your chain yanked.
Yes,
dear.
just a bit.
But overall, very impressive. And I've got to say, considering all that it does. If it wasn't for the fact there's the X2200 as well, I'd be saying that's a hell of a price. But given I know there's one, not as powerful, granted, but a receiver below that also does Atmos and DTSX for £500, that's a hell of a price. But it's still competitively a price. It's well designed. It does the job nicely. Very good. Very impressive.
I think the £500 one, you would take a punt on that if you were waiting to see which way the market's going to go, I think. You don't mind £500, as a stopgap, do you? I think anything over that, then... like you say, it starts to become a bit of, well, I'm making an investment here. Or is that just me? Am I just happy to throw away £500?
No, I think most people would call £500 or less, that'd be a budget receiver. I don't think £1,000 will be classed as a budget receiver. So that is that strange area, though, isn't it? That kind of, less than £500, okay, that's a budget receiver. more than £1,000, you're looking at a fairly higher spec receiver. And then there's that kind of mid area where a lot of receivers do sit between the 500 and 1,000, £1,500, which is a lot of money, but you can get some really impressive performance out of a few £100 more. That's what I'm saying, and a bit more flexibility. It depends on what's going to happen, but at least you know that if you buy this receiver, you're covered for both GTSX and Atmos. So whatever happens, you're going to be fine.
All right, so Steve, this is £750. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with that, if you want to listen to records, you're going to add Ed's latest suggestion, which is £3,750 for a record player. Ed?
Yeah. Once again, man of the people that I am. Phil and I, we had a bit of an exchange of emails, and having done the 4 turntables that we originally talked about, the last of which was the clear audio, one thing led to another. I don't want to talk too much about the review because the review doesn't go up until next week. It has been written. That's not me stalling for more time, unusually. This last turntable is another leap up from the clear audio, and the reason why it's been featured is because it makes some claims, mostly legitimate, that it is perhaps the most affordable, and I know that that's a loose use of the word when it's £3,750 of a super deck. That is to say, a completely compromise-free biblical piece of analog engineering. So yes, we've stretched the boundaries a bit more to have a look at a turntable that includes some. I mean, the motor, for just by way of example, the motor is a separate piece of equipment, and it weighs more than I certainly the first 2 turntables that we reviewed put together. And very possibly weighs, I think, as much on its own as the Avid turntable that we did as the 3rd deck. The tone arm is longer than usual. It's a very big piece of equipment. It tips the scales at comfortably over 20 kilos. So yeah, we wanted to see what happens if you take one further step. Now I've put in the copy, and we've discussed in an editorial sense, this is probably as high as we're ever going to go.
Thank God.
Well, yes, absolutely. But need I remind you, it was you that passed me the email for this thing in the first place. I just did what I was told. Famous last words of the week, I know. But nonetheless, we do. The response to the turntable reviews has been very positive. So, the general consensus is we'd like to do some more. But rather than me just picking stuff up because I like the look of it, I'm throwing it out to podcast listeners and people that chop in on the thread. Where do you want to see us go next? Is there anything that specifically interests you in the context of vinyl replay? Do you want perhaps another guide on actually getting the best out of your existing turntable? Throw me some suggestions and we can work it into the schedule and work out what's practical.
Are these? I've got one for you. Are these cheap DJ turntables worth the money in terms of listening back to quality audio?
Well, the short answer is I'm not sure. The irony is, because a lot of the cheap DJ turntables commit the cardinal sin in terms of being a DJ turntable of not being direct drive, there's possibly the chance that they're actually quite sort of refined things. They just won't stand up to very much DJing, which sort of rather negates the point. But we'll see. So yeah, we can have a look at that. Obviously, yeah, I've remarked in the past that a number of products that you don't really expect to have phono stages, Yamaha AV receivers being the classic example, do. But if you want to have a look, at options to get a turntable talking to your AV system, we can do things like that. Well,
I definitely think there's some interest on an easy way of adding a turntable into your system. Maybe it's something that Steve could look at rather than you, Ed.
Yeah.
Because I think, Steve, you're not quite up to Ed's £3,750 being a budget turntable standards yet.
No, well, I put a yet in there, as if he's going to fall to the analog dark side.
Well, I think this is worthy of a test. So, a middle of the road AVR connected, a turntable connected to that of some description, and you get hold of a couple of records and see what you think. I think that would make an interesting article.
There's definitely been a couple of a couple of tuners that. Hang on, we start that again. there's definitely been a couple of turntables that have been released recently, and Ed pointed one in my direction, which is the Project, and there's also been one announced quite recently for Musical Fidelity, where they're turntables that are aimed at connecting to a receiver or a digital system rather than using a phono stage.
Yeah, there's it's not an easy process to do, but yeah, it's it's the most logical thing is to get a signal out of the record player as a digital one, which allows you to then make use of the processing inherent in your AV receiver if you want to, or just run it direct. Or in a stereo sense, you've got lots of people just running DAC fronted systems, and you can pop a digital signal straight into that. It's also worth saying there's a number of people that are very derogatory about that as a methodology, but it's not a budget thing by any stretch of the imagination. There are companies out there who use phono stages that, just as a matter of course in their relationship to their other electronics, convert from analog to digital, and one of those is U.n.c.l.e. So if you go for the full fat exact systems that I went up to see during my U.n.c.l.e. visit some time ago, did for the forums, that if you then connect an LP12 to that, the signal's being digitized. But I can assure you, in no uncertain terms, it still sounds very, very much. It sounds like an LP12. So if the digital conversion is done correctly, it makes no odds at all. The fact that you're then converting the signal to digital. So it shouldn't be a performance impediment if it's done properly.
So there you go, Steve. Your mission is...
Should you choose to accept it?
Well, whether you accept it or not.
No, you didn't get any choice in the matter.
Well, I always wondered that about Mission Impossible. So what happens if the guy said, actually, you know what? I don't fancy doing that mission. Would that be the end of the episode then? Would it?
Yeah, and when you think about what they get up to, I mean, that pay packet must be massive. Anyway, sidetracked. You're going to get these in, aren't you, Steve?
Yeah, that's the plan, yes.
Okay, let's get back to something that we actually know something about. And even then, it's arguable. Top tips for setting up your projector. It's only taken 6 months to do this, Steve. We kind of quickly covered it last month and run out of time. So let's look at it in a little bit more depth. It's one of these things, it's something that I stand by and always have stood by and said, yeah, your fancy TVs, your OLEDs, your plasmas, I was going to say LED LCDs, but I've never seen one that actually gives a cinematic performance. None of them can touch a projected image. And the projected image is just something to behold.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to home cinema, and I believe we might have said this before, size does matter. And you get more bang for your buck from a projector than you will off of any television, no matter how big that screen might be. And as Phil said, I think it's something to do with the fact that it's projected, but it genuinely feels cinematic all the time. Not just because it's a big image, but because it's projected as well. There's this real sense that you're watching a cinematic film-like image. Obviously, different technologies behave in different ways, and some projectors are more cinematic and film-like than others. But definitely, for my money, and I'm sure Phil will agree with this, if you want to get that real home cinema experience, you need to get a projector. And the funny thing is that it's not as expensive or as difficult as people might think it is. In fact, I would say it's considerably cheaper usually than buying a large TV, probably easier to install than buying a large TV, and actually takes up a lot less space than buying a large TV. Because, theoretically, if you wanted to do this initially as a starting point, you could even just use a white wall for projection. I mean, it will work. Obviously, for the best performance, you want to try and get a dedicated screen of some sort, but you could use a white wall, as long as it was smooth and flat and no unevenness on it, and
the only thing,
white wall.
The only thing with a white wall is it needs to be temporary. Because the point is that you're shining light, and that light has to shine back at you, and that's the big area where a screen does the job for you. It reflects that light back into the room, so you get a nice bright image at the seating position. You can project it against a wall, but depending on the wall surface, depending on the paint and all the rest of it, you're not getting that light back, and it's scattering in all different directions in the room. So yes, projector screens, they cost some money, but they cost money for a reason, and the reason is pretty good because they actually work and they do a good job. And that brings us on to gain. And a lot of issues with gain, because people think, well, I haven't got a very bright projector, so I'm going to get a high gain screen. Wrong move. Do not be tempted to do that. Why, Steve?
The higher the gain, the narrower the viewing angle is, and the more likely you are to get hotspots, which is basically bits of the image which are brighter than the others. You can have a bit of gain. There's nothing wrong with a bit of gain. Maybe 1.4 would be fine. But when you start seeing these 2.5 gain screens, unless you're sat dead center, you're going to have a big fall off in performance.
Now you have actual experience of this, don't you? Because you used to have a Stuart screen, and
it was Stuart 130, which is a 1.3 gain screen. Now that's not a lot of gain actually. That's a very low gain screen, in fact. When I originally used that screen in a room with white walls, it was fine. It worked really well. The projector I was using was JVC. It was an HD 100, so it wasn't the brightest projector, and it worked very well with that particular screen in that environment. When I moved and put that screen into a pitch black room, I could see visible sparklies on the surface, very distracting. And that's because it wasn't intended for that environment. For a pitch black room, you want to use a unity gain screen and 1.0 gain. No, in other words, it reflects back what it receives, and that's it. That's the ideal screen for an environment like that.
I even use a negative gain screen in my room. Yes, it's a 0.8.
Why is that? Just to make the blacks a little bit darker?
Yeah, well, because it's a pitch black room, and the other thing is that it's acoustically transparent as well, so you're automatically losing light coming back from that because you've got tiny little holes everywhere across the screen to let the audio through. But I just think it looks nicer and it suits my room, which obviously comes back to the majorly important thing, which is the room that you're going to use, and we'll do that in a second. But yes, I actually have a negative gain screen. I think it's mine is 0.8.
Yeah, so basically you ideally want to avoid very high gain screens. Depending on the environment you're using the screen in, and depending on the projector you've got. Obviously, if you've got a very bright projector, it's not just an issue. But again, if you've got a room with light-coloured walls, white walls, I used to use before that I had a Greyhawk screen. So that's what was that, like a 0.9 gain?
Something like that.
Yeah, so negative gain screens basically. And I know you think, well, a grey screen or a black screen, that just sounds counterintuitive. It does to a degree, but what it means is it's designed to reflect the light directly back to the viewer, and not reflect back ambient light reflected on the screen from the walls or the ceiling. So in less than ideal environments, this can be a very useful and very effective way to get a better image in what would be a normal living environment with, say, white walls or light-coloured walls. The cheapest and easiest way to get a brighter picture is to try and make your room darker. You can buy expensive screens, you can change your projector, you can get a brighter projector, you can do all those sorts of things. But in actual fact, the easiest way to do it is just to try and make your viewing environment as dark as possible. I know that's not easy. I'm not saying get a tin of black paint and start painting the walls black.
That's what I did.
Well, if you can do that, do it. But most people, I suspect, if they start bringing home tins of black paint, are going to have issues with their significant others.
Unless you marry a goth.
Yeah. But what you can do, obviously you haven't got to use black. You could use a darker color, ideally a neutral color. You don't want it to just if it's if you've got bright pink walls around your screen.
Well, if you just think, I think the easy way to explain it, Steve, and this is what I've done with certain people who have asked advice on wall colors. If you think about a grayscale ramp, the color grey works great, and anything towards the bottom end of that scale. Works really well, and it's quite fashionable at the minute to have a dark grey wall, feature wall or something like that. So you could get away with it that way by having the feature wall being the screen wall where the screen retracts, and having that like a really dark grey.
Depending on the room as well, maybe if it's in an alcove or at one end of the room, you might be able to dark paint the area around where the screen is darker at least. That helps. Or if you've got a reflective floor or a light coloured carpet, try putting down a dark coloured rug. Again, that will just minimise reflections from beneath the screen. There's lots of things you can do. Obviously, cutting out light is important. So, get blackout blinds. I mean, normal blinds, but or curtains, but with blackout material in them to cut light out when you're watching during the day. Turn off all the lights in the room when you're watching things at night. It's not like a TV where you might have a bit of bias lighting behind the television. That's quite good. With a projector, you really want to make the room as dark as possible, and that's the key, really. Try and find a room that you can light control and make as dark as possible within reason. Then you need to choose a projector that suits you in terms of technology. And we go through that in the guide. And obviously, you've got DLP, you've got LCD, you've got what's called LCOS, but there's various versions of that. There's SXRD, which is Sony's version. There's DILA, which is JVC's version. There's also liquid crystal on quartz, which is basically Epson's new version of LCOS. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, which we go through in detail. But primarily, the one you need to be aware of is obviously with DLP, single chip DLP projectors, they use a color wheel, which can result in rainbow artifacts. Some people can see them, some people can't. So make sure you don't suffer from those before you buy a DLP projector, because the majority of cheap projectors are DLP projectors, single chip DLP projectors. They can be very bright. They have great motion handling. They can work quite well in rooms with less than ideal conditions. Their weaknesses tend to be the color wheel itself, and obviously their blacks and shadow detail.
Well, they just don't have blacks.
No, they don't have blacks. It's dark grey, basically. LCD, you got 3 chips. So you don't have the problem with the color wheel. You do have a problem, though, or you can have a problem, rather, should I say, over time with dust blobs, where dust gets into the light path because it isn't sealed on an LCD projector. And also their blacks aren't brilliant either. Moving on to LCOS, you get a lot of the tend to get things like certainly with JVC's really, really good blacks, but also pretty good blacks on the Epson, I notice, and to a degree on the Sony's as well. They have the way that they're designed, they have less fill between the pixels, so you can do a pretty big image on those without seeing pixel structure, which you can't really do on LCD projectors. They're all variations of LCD, though, so motion handling isn't as good on those as it is on DLP. So, there's, like I say, there's strengths and weaknesses for all these different technologies. Choosing the one that's best for you is going to depend on the environment you're going to be using it in.
Well, the environment is the most important thing.
Yeah.
There's no point looking at an SXRD or a DLA projector if you cannot black the room out, because the advantage of those technologies are the black levels and shadow detail. And if you've got white walls, white ceiling, white carpet, white furniture and light coming in the room, forget it. Look at a DLP where black levels are not important, because
or maybe an LCD if you suffer from rainbows is an alternative. But
but the room is the most important thing.
Sorry, I did have a question.
Go on.
Just a quick one. What's the quietest technology? Because when I've been around projectors, the one thing that bothered me is the noise, because I don't know, it just bugs me.
It all depends on the model, but DLA, SXRD tend to be under 20 dB, which once it's away from you, you're not gonna hear that. DLP can get really noisy. I mean, that last DLP that I looked at, the BenQ, I mean, it was really noisy. You're talking about 30 dB. So, and the one that you looked at, Steve, the laser one, was a little bit loud as well, wasn't it?
Oh, that was okay. That was, I would say, that was equivalent to one of the J. It wasn't as loud. It was about the same as the JVCs and the. It wasn't like silent. But your room's like mine, isn't it? So you sit right next to the projector. Yeah, I can hear. If it's loud, I'm going to hear it. I mean, basically, the problem with DLP projectors tends to be that they often have very bright bulbs, which means more cooling because they're producing a lot of heat. So a lot more fan noise. Plus, they've also got the noise of the color wheel spinning around.
Great in the winter. That's why they're absolutely brilliant in the winter. You want to. Don't review one in the summer like I did. Wrong move.
But yeah, generally, depending on what you choose, Mark, you can get some very quiet projectors now that you're not going to really notice, I don't think. I was surprised. What surprised me was when moving on to things like, because we want to talk about this now, since you mentioned it, light sources. So you've got different technologies in terms of projectors, then you've got different light sources. And predominantly, the majority of projectors available these days use a bulb. They use a UHP bulb. I mean, there have been projectors in the past that have used xenon bulbs, like the Sony VW100 that used the xenon bulb. Very quiet, almost whisper quiet, because it doesn't produce as much heat. Yeah. But they're really expensive.
Yeah, and you don't want to sit next to one when it explodes.
No, they are very dangerous and really, really expensive, which is why they don't get used very much in domestic environments. But my God, that projector was quiet. Usually it's a UHP bulb of varying brightnesses depending on the model you buy. More recently, we've seen LEDs being used as a light source. Initially, they were on some very expensive projectors, but in the last couple of years, we've seen Optoma with their HD91, which is, I think, 2999. So it's $3,000 basically for an LED projector. That's was a massive drop in price compared to anything we'd seen prior to that. And they're relatively quiet, not as quiet as I thought they would be, because the problem isn't so much that they have to dissipate a lot of heat, but that they have to keep the LEDs at a very specific and very controlled temperature, and that required a degree of cooling as well. So they weren't as quiet as they were going to be. They've also got. There was a brief foray into LED laser hybrids. So that was using a laser combined with 2 LEDs. The ones I've reviewed in using that particular light source struggle. They use a laser to create green, because green's the biggest part of the visual spectrum, so it makes it brighter than because one of the big problems with LED projectors is that LED projectors weren't very bright. Adding the laser makes it brighter, but it had this massive green green measurements of green on the CEI chart were huge.
That points to a lot of the criticism as well that's pointed to Sony's and JVC's, because people say, well, they're not very bright. The reason for that is that UHP bulb, and like you say with the laser there using green, the vast majority of the energy is green energy, green and yellow energy from a UHP bulb, and very, very little red. And to get an accurate image, and when you're talking about JVCs and Sonys, that's what they're going for. They're going for a cinematic, accurate image. You have to tame the brightness to tame the green and the yellow spectrum, basically, and boost your red end of the scale. And that's why they're not any more than probably about 800 or 900 lumens once they're calibrated, because you're basically fighting against the fact that what's giving them the light is also what's making them really inaccurate.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's laser LED hybrids, and now most recently we've seen a laser projector, which was the Epson LS10000. That uses 2 lasers, and I have to say, I've got the review sample that I tested was very accurate. So certainly in terms of accuracy, they've improved that immeasurably from when they were doing laser LED hybrids.
So it's using 2 lasers, Steve. This seems to be the sensible way to go about it. Why?
They're using 2 lasers. They're using 2 blue lasers for a start. So one's obviously doing blue, and then the other laser is bouncing off a phosphor and creating red and green. I think the problem with the previous, with the LED laser hybrid, was basically they were using a laser to just produce the green. So the blue and the red were LEDs, and it was just swamping the rest of the image in terms of the color accuracy and the levels of the colors. Whereas now that they've balanced it out more and adjusted it so that you're getting a bright image, much brighter than you would get. I think it's really quite bright image, certainly way brighter than you're getting off of the Sony and JVCs with their UHP bulbs. But at the same time, you're getting a controlled image where you're getting an accurate color. So I guess their approach is now, I think personally, going forward, laser projection will become the de facto way of doing it in the end. It's obviously a cost factor at the moment, but you get, much longer lifespan than you would with a bulb. You get more consistency rather than you will with a bulb over the length of that life. And it just seems like a more sensible way of doing it. But clearly, there's a cost factor at the moment. I mean, the LS10000 is just under £6,000, so it's not cheap.
And you've got to think that actually they might actually just be washing the face basically with that, I think.
Yeah, quite possibly. And that's one of the important things about projectors when they're using UHP bulbs. Because you've probably seen people do this in offices and boardrooms and that sort of stuff, where they just unplug a projector and don't let it cool down. When it's using a bulb, it's very important that it warms up and cools down before it turns off. Yeah. And that's why when you do turn them off, you'll see the fans will still be going, even though you turn the projector off for some time afterwards, as it slowly cools the bulb down. That improves its performance and its useful life. And you really need to do that. You need to take care of your projector when you buy it. It's not something you can... Well, a laser projector and a LED projector, you can just turn on and off instantly like a TV. A bulb-based projector, you need to give it a little bit of TLC.
Yep. And there's lots of manufacturers who have fallen by the wayside, much the same as the TV business, Steve. But what they have done, and I'm thinking about the likes of Panasonic here, who no longer do consumer projectors, but they are massive in the professional side of things. What we're hoping is going to happen over the next few years is that this laser technology, once it reaches a certain scale and it becomes cheaper, it makes a lot more sense to then try and introduce consumer projectors back into the consumer market, because like you say, they don't need as much TLC, they're instant on and off, the light source will last the life of the product. It makes more sense because there's lots of things at the minute that put people off projectors, and the only projectors that they've probably seen are stuff down the pub or in, like you say, in a boardroom or meetings, where that's really not the pinnacle of projection technology and the picture quality that you're going to get at home. But I think laser technology, it makes it more appealing for manufacturers and the general public.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a sad fact the majority of people's experiences of projection outside of a cinema is in a pub or at work, and not in an ideal situation. And when I have shown people, I say to people, well, I've got a projector, that's what they immediately think. Then when they see it, they realize suddenly, oh my God, this is like being at the cinema. This is incredible. And certainly I was watching The Water Diviner last week with a friend, Yeah, there was a beautiful image, beautiful projected image, in 1080p. Lovely, and it can do that. And you're right, Phil. Going forward, certain companies are going to have an advantage, I think, in terms of economies of scale. If they're active in the professional market, they can bring this technology through into the consumer market with a degree of success. And that's certainly what Sony have been doing, I think, we haven't mentioned it up till now, but in terms of resolution, if you want to buy a 4K projector, a native 4K projector at the moment, you're limited to Sony. They are currently the only manufacturer making native 4K projectors for the consumer marketplace. That may well change next month when Cydia comes along, because that's when the new projectors tend to get announced. It might be something else, but as it stands, it's Sony. So if you want to buy a 4K projector, that's your only bet right now. There are some alternatives like JVC and Epson who are doing their, the eShift 4K enhancement feature, and that will accept a 4K signal. So there's a degree of, you do get some improvements there. But in terms of actual native 4K, it's Sony. And basically what they're doing is they're leveraging off the back of their professional business. And I'm sure we'll see others do that too.
Well, the first one that came to market, it was just a miniaturized version of a professional cinema projector.
The VW1000, wasn't it? And even at £18,000, that was a remarkable achievement, I think. I mean, technologically, that was a staggering achievement to get all that into that chassis. And that had, DCI, color space. I mean, it was a professional projector, basically, in a consumer chassis. And, you can see where things have gone from there, because you're talking now about the VW300, which came out end of last year. And that's what's that? That's about 5,800, I think, currently. So we've already gone from 18 grand to 6 grand. And we will see, I'm pretty sure we will see some new projectors coming out soon, probably for Christmas, at an even lower price point that will be native 4K. Because, obviously TV is just taken off now in terms of 4K, and its projection will be next. And on a big projection screen, that's where you're going to really see the difference in terms of resolution. Obviously, there are other factors we've been talking about recently, things like, color space and high dynamic range, that sort of stuff. But certainly for sheer resolution on a big 10-foot screen, it's pretty obvious, whereas it's maybe not so obvious on a 50-inch or even a 60-inch screen. So it's exciting times, I think. As with TV, it is exciting. There's got changes coming up, but I think going forward next year and the year after, we'll see more 4K and more laser projection as a light source, and that's what I'm waiting for, really, personally.
Okay, so that is our top tips for setting up your projector. The projector guide is now available. Go to the projector forum, and the articles are stickies at the top in that forum. Go and have a look if you're interested in projectors in any kind of way. And you can also send us your questions either on the thread underneath the podcast or via Twitter at AVForums. And normally at this point we've got games news, but there is no games news this week, so it's movie news next. So you're going to have Steve again.
You're still there, Ed?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, Steve, what's at the cinema?
The Man from U.n.c.l.e., the film version of the 60s TV series that starred Robert Vaughn and David McCallum. Basically, the concept's quite simple. It's set in the 60s during the Cold War, and a Russian agent and an American agent have to team up in order to prevent a rogue third party from getting hold of a nuclear weapon and causing basically worldwide destruction. Henry Cavill, British actor who currently plays Superman, plays Napoleon Solo, who's the American spy, and Armie Hammer, who was most recently seen in the Lone Ranger, playing the Lone Ranger. He plays Ilya Kuryakin, who's the Russian spy, and it's directed by Guy Ritchie, and kind of like any Guy Ritchie movie, really, it's as well tailored and as tasteful and as enjoyable and comfortable as one of his suits. It's basically, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a nice, easy 2 hours of hokum and fun. It hasn't done particularly well at the box office. I think it didn't exactly bomb, but it didn't do very well at all in the States. And I think that might be partly a lot of people don't remember the TV series, or it lacks real star power. I mean, the names aren't that well known in it, and maybe maybe it's a bit too light and fluffy for some people. People just didn't get it. But certainly, I found it to be. I thought the 60s look and feel was very well done. The way that Ritchie directs it has kind of got that 60s, lots of zoom in and zoom outs and split screens and that kind of stuff. It's funny in places. The plot's very easy to guess. It's not particularly clever, but the performances are fun. I know you don't like him, Ed, but Hugh Grant I thought was quite good fun in it.
Don't get my reasons for disliking Hugh Grant actually don't have anything to do with his acting. So I'm sure he puts in a perfectly reasonable performance.
Do tell. Oh, it's because of the press thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he's another massively hypocritical twat. But again, that doesn't necessarily impinge on his ability to act.
Yes, so it's well made, entertaining, and untaxing, and I guess that's what you probably want from an evening at the movies. I think Shona gave it 7 out of 10. I'd agree with that. I think that's probably about right. It's I don't think it's not going to make. Sorry,
she gave it 6.
Did she? I thought she gave it 7.
Yeah, no, you see, she gave Pixels a higher score, and I kept saying
that was Cassandra. Yeah, much to my surprise, gave Pixels a higher score. Yeah, I think a 7's about right. I think it's well made and entertaining. Man from U.n.c.l.e, and I think the cast are charming, the direction's good. The story isn't as clever as it thinks it is, but I don't think. Unfortunately, I don't think it will do that well. I think probably it lacks that little something to make it. I mean, although why Jurassic World's made 1.6 billion is beyond me. I can't explain that at all. So I guess William Goldman's right. When it comes to the film industry, no one knows anything. And I would have given it 7 out of 10, even if Sharina only gave it 6. But I am absolutely gobsmacked that Cassandra quite enjoyed Pixels.
Maybe she's just an Adam Sandler fan.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say there's an immediate knee-jerk to hate Pixels just because Adam Sandler's in it. And if anyone else had been starring in it, maybe would have thought, well, video games, go and check it out. So perhaps it isn't as bad, but it has had, with the exception of Cassandra's review, almost universally bad reviews.
There you go, flying the flag. Vive la différence.
Okay, what's coming up at the cinema this weekend, Steve?
Sinister 2 and Vacation. Vacation being a modern remake / sequel for anyone seen it? National Lampoon's Vacation? Chevy Chase. Basically, the son from that has grown up, Ed Helms plays the adult version, and he's taking his family across country to go to Wally World in the same way that his dad did in the original film. And hijinks and merriment ensues, and probably some very tasteless jokes as well.
As long as they're back in a wagon queen family truckster.
There was one. They were in some Albanian people mover thing, and there was some quite funny gags in the trailer relating to that, I have to say. Plus, also in the trailer, the Rude Red Band trailer, there was Chris Hemsworth, and I've got to say, he was sporting a very large appendage. That was quite funny too. It probably would be quite a good laugh, actually. It looked quite funny in the trailers. I'm
not going to climb aboard the highbrow wagon. I'm not above a good knob gag.
And is anyone going to see these movies?
Yes. Cassandra has actually asked to see Vacation, so there you go.
She's not above a good knob gag either.
Accused of making her see stuff she doesn't want to see.
What's that syndrome that you get where the kidnap Stockholm? That's what it is. She's got Stockholm syndrome. Now, have you got this right? Because we mentioned this once before and we got the wrong city.
Didn't Withers plump for Helsinki? I mean, to be honest,
wasn't I doing that? I may have been a joke directed at Die Hard, though, because doesn't the guy in Die Hard say the TV presenter go Helsinki as in?
Well, I don't know what your motivations.
Don't they call it Helsinki syndrome in the film, even though it's actually Stockholm syndrome? Because some guy had written a book called, was it something like terrorist captive terrorist, an exercise in duality or something like that.
I don't know.
I don't know. You've taken it a bit too far.
I may have said it as a joke.
Yeah, you've taken it too far now.
I lost me completely, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I noticed while I was on holiday there was some bang-up-to-date Blu-rays reviewed.
Yes, I'll do the Blu-ray roundup. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Out today, our day of recording, so on the Monday. Videodrome. Mine arrived yesterday, thanks to the wonders of Amazon Prime. And I've got to say, a fantastic set from Arrow Films. Obviously, the movie Videodrome, plus 4 of David Cronenberg's early films, early sort of short films he made, which is quite nice, and a whole load of extras, and also a really nice book that comes with it called Long Live the New Flesh. So a fantastic set there. If you're a fan of Cronenberg or early 80s horror, and I think Videodrome is quite a prescient film these days. Looking back now, it's more prescient than ever.
Is that the one where you plug yourself into the...
Yeah, well, he finds a signal, a Videodrome signal, which is basically broadcasting what can be described as snuff and porn. Yeah. But within that, there's a kind of another signal which actually causes hallucinations. And there's a bit where they're wearing a big VR headset and this kind of stuff. A lot of stuff in it. I mean, obviously the technology at the time was well behind, but they really he came up with some interesting ideas that I think are a lot more relevant now than they were back in '83, and it's got some interesting ideas. You remember when there's the breathing video cassette and the TV that breathes, and doesn't James Woods puts the video cassette into its Betamax, by the way, I noticed in the film, puts it in his slot in his stomach that appears.
That's the bit I remember.
Yeah. It's a typical Cronenberg, it's a bit out there, but I think a great film with a good performance, fantastic performance from James Woods, and also Debbie Harry's in it too. So if you're a fan of that, this new collector set is absolutely fantastic. All right, also out this week, Grosse Point Blank, which is an old John Cusack movie. Wayward Pines, which was on TV on Sky recently, and I quite enjoyed, worth checking out. Humans, which was on Channel 4 recently, and if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. But it was really, really good. And also The Knick, which is a new HBO series directed by Steven Soderbergh, who I thought had retired, starring Clive Owen, about the early days of surgery in America.
Okay, well, thanks to Mark for presenting that and Steve for talking. Right, so 123 days until Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. 18th of December. I think we're all excited about this. But there was some stuff went on over the weekend. Very quickly, Steve, and then we'll open it up for discussion and get Ed and Mark to talk.
Okay, basically Disney had their convention over the weekend where they announced a new lineup for the next few years, not just Star Wars, obviously they also mentioned Marvel and Disney stuff like Pirates of the Caribbean, Pixar, etc. But the stuff that probably was most interesting to us was Star Wars later stuff. So they had J.J. Abrams was talking about some of the characters in the new film and their backstories. I won't go into that because I don't want to do any spoilerish stuff. But I think that we mentioned before, because it's Disney / Marvel / Lucasfilm now, they've got loads of books coming out and comics and things that are basically filling in the gaps between episode 6 and episode 7. The new TV series Rebels, which is set between episode 3 and episode 4, its first season's already been on TV and is out on Blu-ray in September. Season 2 starts soon, and that will have Darth Vader in it. They had Star Wars anthology Rogue One, which is the one being directed by Gareth Edwards. They've announced the whole cast for that now, which is pretty impressive. Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, Forrest Whitaker, Riz Ahmed, Donnie Yen, Mads Mikkelsen, Alan Tudyk. That comes out on the 16th of December next year. So
right.
A bit to that one. My
first question, because I've avoided this stuff even since you told me this morning, and there was some photos as well released, and I've ignored them. I've ignored them. I don't want to know anything. Don't want to know anything about it. I don't want a repeat of 99. But this interests me. Mission to steal the Death Star plans. Now, is that Death Star 1 or Death Star 2?
Death Star 1.
Right.
So it's just before episode 4, basically, it takes place.
So is so that's before the Bothan spies?
Yeah, they were the second Death Star.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they're not Bothan spies. Apparently, it's going to be kind of a team on a mission, battle, mission behind enemy lines kind of feel to it, war film vibe.
And they were going for a morally ambiguous sort of vibe.
Yeah,
no one's truly good, so to speak.
Sounds interesting. Then episode 8 will come out on 6 months after that, so 26th of May 2017. That's Rian Johnson directing, who made Looper, and apparently Benicio del Toro is in talks to join the cast for that. Then the following May 25th, 2018, we've got the Han Solo standalone movie, directed by Chris Miller and Phil Lord, who made the Lego Movie and 2120 Jump Street. They are currently casting an actor in his late teens, early 20s to play Han Solo. And then finally, they announced the director for episode 9, Colin Trevorrow, who just made Jurassic World. He's going to be directing episode 9, which is going to be coming out on the 24th of May 2019. And then finally, they announced, and I guess this is no surprise, that Disney, Lucasfilm will be opening Star Wars Land at Disney World and Disneyland in the near future.
I saw the artwork for that, and if they have a full size Millennium Falcon, I am there.
I might have to go. I might start crying. Because apparently that's what Kevin Smith did when he got on. He had a visit to the set of The Force Awakens, and he said when he walked onto the Millennium Falcon set, he just broke into tears. Like that 7-year-old just came out of him, and there was nothing he could do about it. He couldn't help himself. He just started to uncontrollably cry.
Together, man. Seems to be a lot of mixed reaction to Trevorrow. Looking at Twitter, there seems to be. This is the first time I think an announcement has caused a split down the middle when it comes to the fans.
Well, can I ask, out of a position of nigh on total ignorance, what else has the man done? He did
Safety Not Guaranteed and Jurassic World. That's his 2 films.
Really?
Yeah.
Blimey.
It was
Yeah,
safety not guaranteed, wasn't it? And that's some kind of time travel film, isn't it?
Movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I really enjoyed. Thought it was very good. Well, Gareth Edwards has only made Monsters and Godzilla. Ryan Johnson has only made Brick, Brothers Bloom, and Looper before doing Star Wars Episode 8. And even J.J. Abrams hadn't made that many films, although he obviously did 2 Star Trek movies. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, what they need is somebody who can. I mean, if he's not writing it, depends on how involved he is. But certainly, he's proved he can handle a big budget, effects-laden movie and deliver one successfully. Right?
And he wrote Jurassic World as well, didn't he?
Yeah. So he's also a writer. Obviously, there'll be other people involved, like Lawrence Kasdan and people like that, who are overseeing a lot of this stuff at Lucasfilm. But what you need is someone who can handle a film of this scale. I mean, I have no idea what's going to be in Episode 9, but given it will be the third of a new trilogy, there's going to be a big movie, right? You need someone who can handle it. I mean, clearly, as Josh Trank proved with the Fantastic Four, he came from having made one little tiny superhero-related movie, granted, but it was a low-budget film for 8 million quid, got given 150 million to make Fantastic Four, and apparently cocked it up. I mean, granted, Fox are also to blame for making it for the wrong reasons and interfering, but apparently he didn't handle the pressure well. And that's why he dropped out of doing the Han Solo movie, or rather, Lucasfilm gave him the boot, probably, when they heard the reports coming back from the set of Fantastic Four. But, you want someone reliable who can deliver. And at 1.6 billion at the box office, the guy delivered. Okay, he made a film that none of us thought was going to be a success. And I thoroughly enjoyed. And has made a ton of money. So I'm sure he'll do a fine job.
It's a lot of news all at once, don't you think? Do you think it's too much? It'll drip it out a bit more. I find it a bit
some of that stuff has already been announced. I kind of condensed it all into one email for you guys just to bring you up to speed, really. Because I was assuming you were.
As film fans that keep up to date with everything.
I don't know. At the moment, obviously, we don't know a huge amount about... Well, I mean, there's big holes in our knowledge of all of these things. I've got to say, Rogue One, at the moment, strikes me as the most interesting of these. The Han Solo one is on very, very dodgy ground. Unless you could clone an infant, get a young Harrison Ford by genetic manipulation, it lives or dies on people going, well, he's no Harrison Ford. And I just like the idea of being freed from the arc of sort of Jedi-related stuff. Rewatching, I mean, let's say at the moment, Sky's got all of the Clone Wars series on demand, so I've been, filling in the gaps on those. And it's a constant reminder that some of the strongest episodes in that don't bother with any actual Jedi-related material. And it's the fleshing out of this universe, which strikes me as the most potentially interesting. These are films where I could, I in many ways, I'm more intrigued by them than, watching Mark Hamill lumber his way around again. So, I don't know whether that's a heretical point of view, but these are the ones that interest me. Yeah, I mean, that's where I have more interest. I mean, it's still ironic that this comes out on my birthday. And the one thing I'm not going to do is go anywhere near this film on its day of release.
That's about the third or fourth time you mentioned that now. Are you just making sure that we don't forget that it's your birthday? Is that what this is all about?
Because I had already forgotten again. So.
I want presents.
Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah. I'm very much, I hope this works at the minute. That's where I am. I don't think he's going to balls it up. I think it'll be fine, but I don't know. I've still got bad memories in '99, and I don't want to get my hopes up. Which is why I'm avoiding everything at the minute.
Yeah.
As long as it's episode 7's okay, I'll be all right. I'm not really looking forward to anything else so much. I just want to get that out of the way and just hope that's good.
I'm going to pick up Rebels. Is that region B?
Yeah, you can buy it. It's available on Amazon.
Yeah,
because Clone Wars was a really good animated series, and this looks like
it'd
be fun too.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I'll have a watch of that and start to build myself into Star Wars mode quite without getting overhyped and all the rest of it. And I know what you were saying before about the set and walking around the set and that kind of thing. I'd probably be a blubbering wreck as well, because I know for a fact that as soon as I'm sitting in the cinema and that big Star Wars logo comes up and the music starts, there'll be a big lump in my throat.
It's funny though, isn't it? Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. I can remember after Jedi, there was obviously Star Wars was huge until then, and then gradually, because there was those stupid Ewok things and some kind of animated stuff, but basically there wasn't much going on. And then by the early 90s, it pretty much finished, didn't it? Star Wars was done. No one was buying the toys anymore. No one was buying the books. There were no more films, and obviously it all picked up again in the mid 90s, going into the prequels. And now we're looking at a Star Wars movie every year for the next 6 years,
which is another concern.
Yeah,
because there's going to be but you're taking a risk there. It's 6 films and they've all got to be good.
As long as they can make the kids happy and they'll buy all the merchandise, then.
Yes, I mean obviously let's hit back that they are fundamentally children's.
Well, no, what they should be doing is they should be preaching to the 50, 40, and 30-year-olds who have got the disposable income.
Yeah, but you don't underestimate the power of a nagging child.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all they have to do is build a full-size Millennium Falcon and they'll make an absolute fortune.
Go to the cantina, have a couple of drinks. Actually, I could be well up for this. I've never been to Disneyland or Disney World because I've always hated the idea. But I think this is the first time probably in Disney history that we'll have an adults-only days that you go along.
Yeah, but you just know that they're going to poke the Cantina medley around on speakers, the whole set, all 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, until people just have an embolism.
Yeah, I was quite disappointed to see that they're re-releasing the Blu-rays in steelbook covers, but they're just the same stuff as before.
Yeah,
vaguely. I was hoping desperately against hope that we might get some the original versions released on Blu-ray prior to.
See, that's what I thought was going to happen, which is why it's making me worry a bit more, because you would have thought anybody at Disney that had any sense and thought, how can we make a few million before we start? Oh, I know, let's release the originals on Blu-ray.
Unless they've got loads of old discs they've already printed, and they're just trying to offload everything before they do some new stuff.
Get rid of inventory.
Or there's some level of ownership confusion over.
It could be Fox and stuff going on still, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it could be, and they need to wait for a period of time before they can do their own thing. Because there certainly were, Fox certainly did have distribution rights prior to.
Now you mention it, I think there's something that goes till 2020. I'm sure there is. I'm sure I read about this, that they have to do it with Fox until at least 2020. I'm sure I read it somewhere. Because are the steelbooks, are they Disney branded?
I don't think so, no. I didn't actually look that closely, but I will now you mention it. I'm sure it might still be Fox.
Well, there you go. As you say, it's a nice little learner. So why just what?
I mean, it makes no sense why they haven't done it, but that does make sense. If they can't do it, then it makes sense, doesn't it? Because you would think anybody worth their salt at Disney would have them out.
Particularly since we know they have done 4K remasters and restorations, 4K restorations, shall I say, of those films, of those 3 original films. Obviously, can't do that of the prequels because they weren't even shot in 4K.
Well, they weren't shot in
weird, though, isn't it, Phil? When the curtains open and we don't get the Fox fanfare.
No, there is that, isn't there? You're
quite the same.
You're going to have the Disney thing, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think you'll get over it. Can I inject a moment of reality here? I think you'll manage.
Right, so, I mean, we're not going to get into it too much because, like I say, I'm trying to avoid as much of this as possible. But interesting stuff that was announced over the weekend. It is getting closer. Like we say, it's 123 days to go. Not long. But staying with Star Wars and moving things on a little bit, there was something which was really quite entertaining that we found on the internet a few weeks ago now. We've been meaning to talk about this on the podcast for a little while now. And that is the shortlist.com had a one of these sort of roundup things where I guess it happens a lot on Twitter, Ed, where people say, horror hi-fi or something like that, and you've got to come up with film titles, but you change them slightly to...
the great one recently was 3-word apocalypse, and someone just instantly shot back with zombies with diarrhea. Thought, well, yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, that would be a terrible film, but it would be bad. So yeah, that sort of thing. Sorry, let's stay on target.
Nicely done there. So obviously John Williams is famous for the theme and so on, but what if the soundtrack to the Star Wars films were done by different groups and so on? And we've had some, album artwork, and I've got to say it was actually Superfi, who are hi-fi and home cinema retailers. I guess they came up with this on Twitter. That's what I'm assuming, that they did this, and then people had started sending in the artwork or whatever, or they've done it themselves, where they've taken well-known albums, Ed, and Star Wars'd them.
Well, yes and no. Sometimes they've run with the artist, sometimes they've run with the title of the artist, and so on and so forth. But yeah, there's been that. The link. We'll pop the link into the discussion thread. But it kicks off with a rejig of the original Sex Pistols album. So never mind the Sarlaccs. Here's the Sex Blasters. Two-packer. Obviously working on Chewbacca and the late, well, possibly late, I don't actually believe he's dead. That's a conspiracy theory for another day. Tupac Shakur. Taylor Sith. I quite liked that one. 1977. Yeah. That was quite clever. Jabba, as in the Scandinavians. Jabba Gold. It's a nice classy looking album cover, that. Although I do think that Four Huts would have struggled to win the Eurovision Song Contest. Not being from Europe, for starters, but I think they'd have just lacked stage presence. They'd have had plenty of stage presence, just not pleasant.
I love the way they've actually done the album with the bees back to back. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Lady Jar Jar.
You've missed one. You've missed one.
I'm reading them all out. People can have a look at them in the fullness of time. It's quite compelling, really, because I dislike both of those people, so that's all fine. Obi-Wan Direction, it's all pretty good. What was it? I was trying to work at my personal favourite is the Republic Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet, with the Death Star. I thought that was
that's good.
Was quite clever. I mean, the one I thought they missed completely was Yes, and they could have just done Close to the Wedge. Not because he's my favourite Star Wars character, so I think they missed a trick there.
Okay, so question 1, R2-D2 was named after part of George Lucas's address, Road 2, District 2, a piece of film editor's jargon meaning Reel 2, Dialogue 2, a judo throw spelt R2-D2, and Sony's first robot RD-22.
Reel 2, Dialogue 2.
Yep.
That's what I would guess.
You're doing the Star Wars quiz, aren't you?
Yep.
I still hope as well that someone in Disney has read that, been looking through, there's a cracked article, there's other articles on it, of some of the worst characters to have been created in either the novels or the comics of the Star Wars universe. I just think it would be brilliant to reactivate one of those and then kill them. And I'm not talking about Jar Jar Binks. There are actually things dumber than Jar Jar Binks. I mean, there was a Jedi Master that didn't have arms, which would have made lightsaber combat challenging, I suspect. And there was something that looked like Bucky O'Hare, which was in loads of the comics. So yeah, I'd also like them to reactivate some of the dross which has been created over the years, just for the laugh.
Right, so we'll put the link for the cover art, album cover art, in the podcast thread. We'll put that Star Wars quiz in there as well, so you can have some fun doing the quiz. So that's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
You're a petty schmuck.
Mark Hodgkinson.
I've come here to say one magic word to you.
And Ed Selley.
My teeth have begun to fall out.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums for the latest reviews, news and video. And Steve, what we can do on iTunes?
No, I was being slightly distracted by that Star Wars quiz. Leave us a rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoy the show.
And make sure it's 5 stars. I'm Phil, and thanks very much for listening. We're off to do the Star Wars quiz, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Oh, and it's episode 100.